So let us start the discussion on the GS paper 1. And what are the objectives of this discussion? Is the objective is to teach or to give you a technique of writing. So I'll say it as both, but the major emphasis will be on technique of writing rather than teaching. When I set this question paper, I had some specific objectives in mind. How the student is going through different sub-questions within a question. Most of the time, students don't answer all the sub-questions which are being given to them. They do not answer that. They answer one of the major aspect of the question and they come home saying that we wrote extraordinarily. The major part of the second paper, the style of the questions makes you to feel such a way that the paper is easy. But when you write the answers, you feel you don't have the content. You know something, but you don't have sufficient content. So in this class, okay, a question has come up on a strategy to fight urban poverty, or strategy to fight towards gender equality. The gender equality is also related to poverty. So the strategies by and large are going to be the same. So if women comes up, what are the value additions we need to do? So the Beijing platform of action, like that, or else Hyogo protocol. So against our discrimination against women, what are the international conventions we have? So like that, when we have those 5 to 6 points in our hand, we will be in better position to value or enrich our answer. So our objective is to write a decent answer, sticking to the basics. You shall stick yourself to the basics, nothing more than that. So basics, when I mean answering all the dimensions which the question has asked you, minimal enrichment of the answer, an opinion and conclusion with an opinion. So these three things if you are following, then my minimal basic criteria is met. When I am correcting the papers, what I have observed is, most of you do not have the energies to sit for 3 hours. Your energies are getting exhausted after 1.5 to 2 hours. So completion of the paper, keeping up your concentration intact for 3 hours, it is very critical. How will I come to know about this? If I see first 9 answers, these are extremely good. These are good at least. From 9th answer onwards, what you write you don't know, or what you are trying to write or express, no one can understand. So maintaining consistency. So exceptional on one side and being poor on the other side, other extreme, it will not do good for us. If you are getting 6.5, 7 marks in one question, the other question you are reducing yourself to 2 marks, I will not be very happy about that. If you are consistently getting 5, 5.5 marks, I will be very happy. So for me, the most important aspect when I correct the paper is your consistency. So last 1 or 2 questions, time constraint, a time crunch will be there for everyone. But your consistency, when you have the time crunch, immediately how can you change your strategy so that you can give the same information through pictorials and points, that is very important. So make sure, last year, a stopwatch experiment we did. So for every 7 minutes, the watch has to give you a beep. So it means your time allocated for each question is 7 minutes. At any circumstances, if 7 minutes is finished, you need to shift on to the other question. Now, so in this session, what are our objectives? Let's come back to this. The first is to make you understand what are the dimensions of the question and to generate a particular opinion, how to make small pictures from the World Development Report, etc., so that your answer gets enriched, and then making sure that we complete the paper in the examination, and we complete the paper in such a way that we stick to our basic minimum standards, and we try to get average marks on each question, rather exceptional on few and poor on few. So average marks for each question is more important to me. So when we see a question, first we need to believe that we know the answer. If the questions are factual, we can't do anything. But if the question is analytical, we shall be able to write certain answer because we prepared for this exam for these many years. And the next aspect over there is framework. That's what I call it as localization. So what do I mean by localization? When you see the question, you shall be able to get into the root of the question. So let's take, if you see this question, where is it related to? Civil society. So the civil society, where is it in our syllabus? It is at the development industry or development process. The civil society is part of developmental industry or developmental process. That's where we have the civil society. Now, if it is the case, the question framer or the examiner who is framing this question, he tries to look the developmental dimension to the civil society. 2 years back, connecting the political parties and pressure groups, there was a question. Why the question has linked itself to the political parties? Because the question was part of the polity syllabus. NGOs are the part of the governance, development syllabus. So there, as a part of the politics, he tried to ask you a question on difference between pressure groups and politics, because the syllabus has been linked to that. So whenever an examiner is asking the question, by localization, you can get insight into the mind of the examiner. So get into the mind of the examiner. First localize. Then the second advantage is you also get ready reckoner, or else immediately you can recollect all the points which you have read. Because our objective is to read multiple times the same point so that we can consolidate that. Read it 2 or 3 times so that you get that sentence or that particular orientation to the answer. So when you are going to that particular topic, you get 1 or 2 points generated automatically from the question. So the next aspect is the funnel approach, we call it as. What is this funnel approach? We shall start from a general perspective where we open up the wider aspects. Slowly we shall move towards the specific points. If you are writing randomly whatever the point which comes to your mind, that do not appear good for us. So coming to each question, the first rule of the game is general to specific. If you want to come from general to specific, the localization will help you. So localization means keeping the question in the context of the syllabus. So then the broader aspect it will open up. So this question is related to development. So from that localization you can start the general. Slowly you can converge it onto the specific. Finally you can make your opinion. So here you don't appear yourself moving away from the question drastically. And second aspect, when question has multiple dimensions, read the question, and while reading the questions, what are the dimensions you want to answer? Try to make a map and don't deviate that map. What happens? When you wrote half the answer, you will be drifting away from it. So let's take when you are making a sleep driving, automatically car goes out of the track, out of the road. Similarly, when your intellectual energies are so strained in these 3 hours, you cannot keep your focus in so that your answer gets drifted, because you are taking only the core aspect of the question rather than all the dimensions of the question. Whenever you read the question, when you identify the sub-questions, immediately write down the 3 dimensions or 4 dimensions which you want to answer there. These 4 aspects shall become your side headings or subheadings, which examiner can immediately connect it to. Right. So without that, if you are going just try to answer, then by at least after 100 words, your answer will be something irrelevant. So those side headings which you want to write, the sub questions, keep them aside first. First decide them and keep them aside. So this entire exercise shall happen within 15 to 20 seconds. So unless you practice it, you can't make this exercise in 15 to 20 seconds. Now, let's come to the first question. Corruption in governance has its deep roots in politics. Identify them. So, how the politics and governance are related to? That's where we can start it as. So, the politics, they provide for guidance to the governance. They decide the agenda for the governance. So here, what is the first exercise we need to do? Identify the sub-questions. How many sub-questions are there? So identification of causes of corruption, and then electoral bonds, alternatives to fight electoral corruption. So these are the 3 sub-questions which I have. So generate the subheadings now. What are the subheadings you generate? So politics and governance in corruption, and then electoral bonds, alternatives to fight the electoral corruption. So 3 subheadings you got. So then making the information into that framework becomes easy. So politics or governance flows from the value of the politics. Politics flows from the values given in the Constitution. So democratic accountability is centered on the core principle of elections or core process of elections. So in India, how the elections are? The increased money and its role in the elections has made the business politics nexus. The business politics nexus. And after that, the centralization of decision making in political system also has led to the centralization in bureaucratic decision making. And everywhere the centralization has become a rule. And it has decreased the accountability to the people. And the next point is, electoral corruption is also dependent on transparency, and then this transparency plus monopoly plus transparency minus accountable is Robert Klitgard. Monopoly plus discretion minus accountability is equivalent to corruption. So from that perspective, you can talk about that. So you take 3 points, this is done for us. Yes or no? Because corruption flows from politics to governance. Because if the politics is value oriented, the corruption is less. So you can talk about the history of India to an extent. So from initial days till 1991 or 1984, so there are after emergency, before emergency. That way you can make the divisions with regard to corruption. So post 1991, after liberalization, as we are getting stabilized with coalition politics, then also it has led to increased corruption, LPG coalition politics. And before that, as Prime Minister, he himself has got into the corruption charges, Prime Minister and his family, then obviously it has provided for a leverage, loss of legitimacy of the government. So in the early days, the corruption is very less because the austerity and also integrity in life is valued. So that you can quote it as an example to prove your point, how the corruption and governance are related to each other, a historical narrative to prove your point. And then electoral bonds. So first, when this electoral bonds kind of words comes up to you, you need to explain those words. So what is an electoral bond? And how the government is trying to fight electoral corruption through electoral bonds. So electoral bonds, what they are meant for? So they are the donations from the business to the political parties on an anonymous route. So this anonymity can, under the wheel of anonymity, can give a chance for quid pro quo, where it can heighten the corruption rather than decreasing it. On the other hand, the argument of the government is the anonymity provides for the freedom for the business people to operate without any fear of retribution from party in power. So essentially, in competitive politics in a democracy, the political parties have to get their financial sources from the people. Right? So then, there are other alternatives to get that. So what are they? Crowdfunding. Now, suggest the alternatives to fight electoral corruption in India. So what are the things you have? Right, public funding or else state funding of elections, and then transparency in political parties, and then bringing them under RTI, and stopping the cash donations to the political parties. All these points you can talk about with regard to electoral reforms. Total, how many points we got in this? Somewhere around 10 to 12 points we got. So if you write all those points, your page will not be sufficient. Believe that we know the information, we have the answer. That is what is the first thing that makes a difference. So what are the points I will underline over here? That is, what is electoral bond? Right, is disadvantages of electoral bonds. Or the next is the other alternatives to improve the election process in India. The procedural democracy and substantive democracy both are important. Cleaning the elections is critical for improving the procedural democracy in India. That's what my opinion is. What government does once in 5 years, or what happens once in 5 years, is also important to keep track of what is happening in between 5 years. What happens between 5 years is governance. What is happening once in 5 years is elections. Elections is a political process, governance is this thing. So, what happens between 5 years is determined by what is happening once in 5 years. That's what is the question. Have you got this? Civil society institutions in India are facing a legitimacy crisis. Obviously, always express your opinion. Now, this question, where is it related to? Civil society. Now, civil society, it is about their legitimacy, accountability. So, what are the recent measures taken by the government of India in this direction? Now, whenever we talk about legitimacy crisis, do you think so? That is the first question. Then, if you think so, identify the reasons and suggest the measures to improve accountability. And then, what are the recent measures taken by the government? I wantedly gave these lengthy questions for you to identify the sub-questions and get an habit of writing all the dimensions related to the question. To develop that habit, I framed the questions this way, wantedly. Right. So now, here, legitimacy crisis, when I say outcome legitimacy, process legitimacy. What is meant by process legitimacy? How are you running an organization? And how are you meeting your ends? So both of them are important to achieve the legitimacy. How you earn the money, for what you are spending the money. So a Robin Hood style that I am taking the money illegal route, but I am spending it through the legal, for the welfare of the people. That do not work. So a process legitimacy and outcome legitimacy, both of them are suffering with regard to these civil society are concerned. So in this case, process legitimacy, what is that? The source of funds, and then transparency, internal corruption, lack of standards, all this comes under the process legitimacy. Outcome legitimacy means to what extent you are able to meet your goals. It means to what extent you are being made accountable to the outcomes you are expected to achieve. To whom you are answerable to? Are you answerable to your donors or the people whom you are serving to? So these are the issues which comes up. So here Prime Minister Modi, he made certain statements. NGOs are 5-star activists. It means they are missing their they are missing the ground realities. That's what is this thing. On the positive side, UN Secretary General called civil society as oxygen for democracy. I want you to use 1 or 2 statements like this, which have come in the news. So UN Secretary General, he called civil society as oxygen for democracy. So in a democracy, any institution that is transparent and accountable, that enjoys the legitimacy. Lack of transparency, lack of accountability, activism of the civil society, all these are undermining its importance in democracy in India. They are undermining its importance in democracy. So that's what is. Civils are facing a legitimacy crisis. Do you think so? So do we have 4 or 5 points with us or not? Power imbalance within the civil society, lack of transparency and accountability, added to that corruption, and then growing rift between the government and civil society, and then ignoring of ignoring of the result orientation, or taking a different developmental perspective. All these things are the civil society crisis. Lack of collective action, all these are the reasons for the crisis of the civil society. He is specifically asking about the legitimacy crisis. So legitimacy crisis can be broadly divided as process crisis and the outcome crisis. Anywhere legitimacy, anywhere crisis comes up, process and outcome crisis. So if you have that framework, you get the points automatically. And then identify reasons and suggest measures to improve accountability of the civil society. So here, in your class, I spoke about National Policy on Voluntary Sector 2007. It has recommended for an accreditation and rating agency for the civil societies, so that the donors can understand how well functioning that civil society is. And accreditation agencies. And second is, recently current affairs, what is the news? NGOs shall be brought under Lokpal. NGOs shall be brought under RTI. These are the issues which are been coming up. So, identify reasons we discussed, suggest measures to improve accountability, an accreditation and rating agency, and second is equality standards. World Association for NGOs, it has developed a quality standard for the civil society. India also has to develop such a quality standard. And then, next is, if regulation but self-regulation is the way forward, is the point which we need to talk about. What are the recent measures taken by the government of India? Supreme Court judgment. Every civil society shall file an RTI, right to information. What is that? File an income tax returns, ITR, sorry. It shall file an ITRs. So only less than 5% of the civil society organizations are filing their ITRs. Less than 5% of the organizations are filing their ITRs, income tax returns. And second is, Foreign Contribution Regulation Act, cancellation of the licenses. Ministry of Home Affairs new rules. So, what are these new rules? The civil society is not expected to take any actions that damage the sovereignty, integrity, legislative, all these friendly relations with the foreign countries. These are the Home Ministry recent rules are. So, to substantiate that, what is the current affairs we write? Public Health Foundation of India, Compassion International, these are the few things you talk about. So, and finally, Ministry of Home Affairs, it has stated that all the laws which are related to the regulation of the civil society shall be brought under it. So, in this context, the civil society and government are suffering from trust deficit. So the way forward is the best regulation for the civil society is the self-regulation. So the state, finally conclusion, in this context UN Secretary General has stated that the civil society is the oxygen of democracy. In this context, its very space cannot be throttled. It cannot be throttled through excessive regulation. That is your opinion. Then you close the answer. So I have used two words which have come up in the newspaper. What are they? 5-star activists on the negative side, and then they are oxygen of democracy. I underline these 2 points. Am I clear with you?
We observe the question. We are writing more points, but each point is very less in size, like not descriptive.
No, that's what is. I want you to cover more of the area rather than covering deep about a single point. It has to be, every point has to be conclusive. I'm not saying that it has to be superficial. It means it has to be conclusive, means it has to be properly closed point. You cannot write too many points on or too much of expansion of the same thing. When you are writing too much of expansion of the same point, then you cannot cover too many dimensions of the question. So cover much broader dimension rather than getting deep into one single point related to the question. Because we have space constraint and time constraint. So with the limited time which we have, we shall show that we know this. More than that, we cannot speak. Now,
what is the outcome legitimacy?
What is that? Functional. Accountability to the people. Right, outcome legitimacy can only improve through people collectives themselves. It has got broader reformation of the society is necessary. So historically in India, the civil society organizations, these are not formed on socio-economic lines, but they are formed on religious, regional, ethnic, on these lines. So that's why the society or societal change, that is very much necessary for outcome legitimacy issues. That's what it is. In the normal terms, I will put it as this way. The civil society actions shall be continuous and well planned, and the citizen groups, they themselves monitor them. Rising the capabilities of the people collectives is very much important for this activity.
So can I say that the allegation against the compassion?
Oh, don't get into the specifics. Right, don't get into the specifics. The question is broad. If you go much into the specifics, then that becomes difficult. Don't go into the specifics of the question, too much of the specifics. So Compassion International as a point, or Public Health Foundation of India as a point, just to support. You are not supposed to expect it to write what happened with Compassion or what happened with Greenpeace, etc. No, that is just a value addition which we are throwing. The next is, discuss the role played by pressure groups in democratic politics. What the roles pressure groups play? Advocacy role, and then policy or protective role, and policy interest. All these things you talk as part of the so-called pressure groups. But the most important, add a note on changing nature of pressure group politics in India. Now, one is the pressure groups are getting more and more politicized. Because I'm talking this from the Hindu article's perspective itself. So when this agitations, especially the civil society agitation has come up, pressure group is a part of the civil society. So with regard to saffronization and with regard to that Film and Television Institution of India, National Board for Films, the CBF, Central Board for Film Certification, there this discussion has come up. One of the issue is the pressure groups have got their own specific getting politicized. So they have got much wider interests. And second is, the pressure groups are slowly transforming in India. Previously they were organized on religion, caste, and region, etc. Now they are slowly transforming into economic lines. So the modern economic or pressure groups such as FICCI, CII, these kind of pressure groups or professional bodies are growing. Previously, pressure groups are majorly centered around religion, caste, region lines. Right. So caste-based politics, all these have provided for the pressure group thing. And now, pressure group is also taking a strong form of lobbying as economic dimension has increased. To an extent, this lobbying is also said to be responsible for growth in corruption. And then they have increased economic base. These are economic power base. They have got huge resources at their disposal as of now. So this is what is the changing nature of the pressure groups in India. So what are the changing nature? What is the changing nature? So the nature or character of the pressure group, how it is changing. And then we are talking about how the politicization of the pressure groups is happening. And then we're also mentioning about economic base of the power pressure groups, how is it increasing. And these changes after the neoliberal agenda, how these are manifesting itself as rise in corruption. So the pressure groups are becoming central to corruption. So pressure group is taking the form of lobbying too. Neera Radia tapes and all these things you can talk about.
What exactly difference between pressure group and civil society?
Pressure groups are a part of the civil society. Pressure groups, civil society, I can talk them as advocacy, interest groups or pressure groups or cause groups. In these pressure groups, these are meant to promote the interests of their own members. So let's take, there is a caste group. I want to promote the interests of only my caste. Only my caste. That's what is the pressure groups does.
So for any change aspect, we should understand the structure of that thing.
So always here changing nature when I spoke about how the social aspect, how the institutional aspect is changing, economic aspect is changing. So almost if you take anything change is concerned, the points will be more or less on this line because this change is influenced broadly by neoliberal agenda. So what is the changing nature of political parties in India? So when this question comes up, how do you talk about? Increasing money power, business politics nexus has increased, on the corruption dimension what I am talking about. So because this is also being influenced by a neoliberal agenda to an extent. So the base of the political party, how is it changing? So like that we need to think it in a structured manner. That's what is your question? So social base, economic base, political base. Now when I wrote about this point, politicization of pressure groups, that's what is the point. And then when I am saying this, there is a transformation. They are becoming from traditional to modern. So traditional to modern means? That is how the caste religious groups are transforming more into economic pursual groups. Right, that is what is tradition to modernity, how they are changing. And then economic base, how is it changing? So that's what is more and more the money at the disposal, making them or shifting them towards lobbying. Previously they have kept an argumentative pressure. Now they are involving with working with money pressure, which is leading to crony capitalism. Right.
Can we add their ways of method becoming more illegal violent protest?
You can add, because the last point is ultimately that's what we want to say, that they are more intrusive of the policy. And here actually, RSS is also seen as a pressure group. Right. So pressure groups are becoming more influential on the government, and the public space is occupied by narrow interested pressure groups. That's what is the point which has come up in Hindu. So the public sphere and private sphere, the gap is decreasing. Pressure groups are also more and more involving with the public aspect of the life. So they are more engaging with government. Right. The next question. Now here again identify the sub-questions. It may be boring to you, but the thing is this. Identify the sub-questions, localize your question, and start writing the answer. What are the subheadings you want to keep in the answer? Start writing the answer. And for points, what are the value additions you want to do? This is how we need to think. So, urban governance in India can be better described as chaos. So, urban governance in India is highly fragmented, existing of multiple governance structures. That's what is chaos mean. In this context, the poor are the worst sufferers. So, can Amrut smart cities change this scenario? Amrut and smart cities, these are meant to improve the infrastructure of the urban areas. They are not meant to change the social structure of the urban areas. And unplanned expansion of the urban areas is also not properly addressed. The democratic structures of governance, such as office of mayor, all these mayor in council, these do not have sufficient voice with regard to the smart cities mission. They function as independent special purpose vehicles. That's why they are creating islands of development in a ocean of chaos. Islands of development in ocean of chaos. So, whenever urbanization comes up, the modern solutions for urbanization. Here, World Development Report 2016, it has given a very beautiful picture. What it says is, one is, it has used smart cities based on this picture. Please note down this picture. You have instrumentation, integration, Any smart cities question is meant for smart cities, which the World Development Report 2016 has given this picture. And then intelligence. We have this intelligence. Instrumentation, integration, intelligence. Then these collectively merge towards, one is inclusion, efficiency, innovation. Inclusion, efficiency, innovation. So these are the things. So what is meant by instrumentation? Collect data. Collect data. How you will collect data? Through sensors. If you take Chicago City, which has come as an example recently in Hindu, they collect data through sensors, traffic flow sensors. So as they automatically collect the data, that helps them to plan for the traffic management. So sensor systems, satellites and society. Sensor systems, satellites, society. Here actually it is social media. What they want to mention is collect data and connect the data. So integration means connect the data. And connect the data. How will you connect the data? So continuous 24/7 operation of internet connectivity. So 24/7 connectivity. Intelligence, analyze the data. Analyze the data. Analyze the data. Analyze the data. So this ultimately leads to inclusion, efficiency, innovation. So this is what is the picture which they spoke about, the smart cities. Smart cities. So it means the smart city shall be driven by data. Obviously, when we have divides with regard to data access among rich and poor, the smart cities are expected to help the people who have connectivity rather than the poor who don't have access to connectivity. This is going to help the rich rather than the poor. That's what is the point which we can draw. In this, you can simply explain the smart cities this way. So what are smart cities? If question comes up, can there be a better picture than this? collection of data, connecting the data, analyzing the data. So for that he has used instrumentation, integration, intelligence. Ultimately it has to lead to inclusion. It means all this will be beneficial smart cities if you have inclusion. Now, note on the steps taken by the government of India to change this situation. What are the recent steps taken by government of India to change this situation? What are the recent acts of the government of India to improve the urban governance? So various indices are being brought in to bring in a competitive spirit across the cities. So if you talk about Swachh Bharat mission, so under this, next is air quality indices, and then providing for direct transfers to the urban local bodies. The fund transfers directly to the urban local bodies bypassing the states. Huh? Right, and that's what is these municipalities of Ahmedabad and Pune which you are talking about, the market bonds, marketization, or brand building of the cities, brand building for financial mobilization, and then the inclusive planning for the cities, especially on the housing projects, and housing for all, inclusive development of the city is the objective. So these are the various initiatives which you can talk about. Can I go to the next question? Rural poverty and urban poverty have different socio-economic bases. Do you agree? Support with examples. Discuss the strategies of government of India to fight the urban poverty. Now, how many questions are there in this? What is the different socio-economic basis for the rural and urban poverty? Support with examples. That is what is, for every question you are supposed to write or point which you are talking about, you need to mention an example. Discuss the strategies for urban poverty alone. So now, poverty, when you go to the core of the topic, so what are the issues related to poverty? Rural poverty, occupational stagnation. Because most of the poverty in the rural India is due to occupational stagnation. And if you go to the urban areas, it is more due to lack of skills and occupational migration. So the poverty is migrating now from the rural to urban areas. Urban areas are becoming the new dens of poverty. And the next is, the rural poverty also has caste basis. Urban poverty has class basis. That's what is one of the student wrote. I think you only wrote that. So urban poverty has class basis. That's how I can conclude simply that point as. So rural poverty has caste. It has its roots in the caste. And then poverty alleviation programs, reduction programs, they have focused more on rural poverty than the urban poverty. So National Rural Health Mission, all these things, rural poverty reduction programs, MG Narega, all these are there in the rural areas compared to the urban areas. So that's why the reduction in poverty has happened due to government intervention in the rural areas. Economic opportunities has created the reduction in poverty in the urban areas, an economic activity. Then, if you come to the rural poverty, this particular post 1991, there is one connection. Urban growth or economic growth is clustered around the urban areas. So the urban growth is a reason for the reduction in the rural poverty. Because improved connectivity between the rural urban areas becoming the centers of the economic activity that has reduced the rural poverty. A series of articles has come up analyzing the poverty in India in the Indian Express. So in that their point is the rural poverty has decreased in India due to increased access to urban areas which are the growth centers. So they specifically praised about Pradhan Mantri Gramin Sadak Yojana. Pradhan Mantri Gramin Sadak Yojana. Next is, now, before 1991, most of the poverty is among the people who are employed in agriculture. But still even today, the poverty is highest among the people who are employed in agriculture. But the percentage of the poverty is decreasing among the people who are employed in agriculture. The reason is, it is not due to improved economic or else improved income from the agriculture. It is due to increased migration away from the agriculture. That's what is the occupational aspect of the rural poverty. Are you getting my point? Rural and urban poverty have different socio-economic basis. What is the social basis of the rural poverty? That is caste. Majorly the caste related and lack of access to the productive assets. And even when you come to the economic basis, that is the lack of access to productive assets, occupational structure, opportunities, all these comes up. And then the poverty reduction programs also focused on the rural areas than the urban areas. And coming to the urban areas, so lack of income security, lack of social security measures. If you talk about food security, that food security do not reach to them. And mobility, occupational mobility, and in this occupational mobility there is no skills, there are no skills among them. So all these things are the differences between the rural urban poverty. Now you also need to have certain indices in your hand to prove these points. Certain indices in your hands. Now if you talk about substantiation, so wherever the urbanization has occurred in India, the poverty has come down. The highest urbanized states have the least poverty in India. If you talk about Tamil Nadu, poverty has come down. Maharashtra, poverty has come down. But where the states are still having the majority of as rural population, there the poverty is still high. It means to an extent poverty also has a geographical dimension. Geographical dimension. And then any poverty has monetary dimension, non-monetary dimension. So monetary dimension is related to income, consumption, etc. Non-monetary dimension is related to health, education, etc. Every poverty discussion has monetary dimension, non-monetary dimension. So if you go by this, the relative incomes of the incomes of the urban poor are high. But if you see the relative well-being of the urban poor is worse than the rural poor. The incomes are high, but well-being is worse. Well-being, I mean the question in the UPSC has come previously like this. Urban poor are worst placed compared to the rural poor. So then these are all the points you have to make out. So non-monetary well-being related to health, education or nutrition and all these are being concerned. The urban poor are much disadvantaged. Right. Now the next is, what are the strategies? What are the strategies?
The reason for urban poor well-being is lack of
urban penalities, lack of social securities, and most of the income has to be spent on basic needs of security, minimal needs of security, and the governmental support is minimum, greater exposure to crime and vulnerability. All these are called urban penalities.
uninclusive cities.
Urban penalities. Urban penalities. Urban poor suffers from urban penalities. Now, the next part of the question, discuss the strategies of Government of India to fight urban poverty. Now, how will you, I mean, when I ask this question, strategy, is it a grand strategy? What can be this? Do I know this? This is what is the thought comes up for me, because strategy means there is some theoretical input has to be there. A common sense answer is more than sufficient for me. What is this? Basic amenities for the poor. So the pro-poor activities. So under pro-poor activities, you talk about something. So development through partnership. So the development through partnerships, you talk about DWACWA, creation of opportunities. So Swarna Jayanti Shahari Rojgar Yojana, and then basic livelihood, basic amenities, housing for all, slum clearance programs. These all the things comes over there. Now, if you take ADB, across Asia, including India, they gave one framework to fight the urban poverty. So what is this framework? So they are called pro-poor activities, the pro-poor orientation, the pro-poor focus or orientation, and then sustainable economic growth, so that more economic opportunities are created for them, sustain economic growth, and then we have sound social development and good governance. This what is the framework for fighting the urban poverty given by the Asian Development Bank. So do we need to write Asian Development Bank gave all this? No, just to organize our points that would be useful to us. So pro-poor focus. What are the points we talk over here? What are the points? So health, basic health needs to be met. Sanitation, that is slum clearance and all these things comes over this. And security. So whatever we talk about street lighting, I mean, this what is the thing with regard to the Delhi Chief Minister, many articles have come up. So the poverty and the violence are been very related to each other. The poor are more prone to violence. And then sustainable economic growth. So how can we achieve the sustainable economic growth? Nurturing of human capital. And then augmenting the basic infrastructure with rising population, talking about gender equity in urban areas. All these are necessary for sustainable economic growth. So, okay, the gender equity, we can keep it under social development. Social security to the poor. And then, so with regard to governance, the responsive, transparent, accountable institutions, decentralization and making the institutions to reach. In this case, in Delhi, especially in the slums, they made the water connections to reach to them. So the Delhi Jal Board, it has made an effort to reach to give them the water connections. So these are the small amenities which the urban poor need. So here, so the social development and good governance. Good governance means responsive institutions for the poor. The social development, so the social protection, gender equality and all these things. Sustainable economic growth, where we need to create an ecosystem for the city growth, where opportunities, more and more opportunities can be generated. So pro-poor, so here the basic amenities, providing of basic amenities, the sanitation and healthcare, these like of basic services to the poor. So all these are the strategies. So here, sustainable economic growth. So how is it has to be achieved? Through networks, through partnerships. So networks, it is example is civil society participation. Partnerships, it is self-help group movement, WACWA. Can I include all my points in this framework or not? So in exam, I'll draw this diagram and I include my points under this before I get into the answer. ఈ ఫ్రేమ్వర్క్ ఎగ్జామినర్ చెప్తానండి. When the last subheading, when I am getting to it, I try to keep these points. Right. So mention this particular flow chart kind of thing in your answer. Right, write down the points because you don't have so much of time and space. Just mention that. If you have to explain this concept, it takes a hell lot of space. Right. Can I go to the next question, friends? So, grassroots movements and people participation are changing the narrative of development. Discuss the change happening. Is it good for socio-economic progress? Substantiate your answer. Add a note on their weakness. Question చాలా ఈజీ అండి, కానీ ఆన్సరే తెలియదు. Because we know that information, we know that answer is there. But for every dimension, do you have information? Last year, this question has come up in the other way around. Participation, how is it useful for governance? Last year, there was a question, how people participation helps governance, kind of. Yes or no? So now, grassroots movements and people participation are changing the narrative of development. So now, recollect, discuss the change happening. So with regard to the grassroots movements and people participation, it is giving voice to the voiceless. Voice to the voiceless. Now if you talk about farmers' movements recently, that's what is the current event. I'll try to take advantage of that current event. So it means the weak and vulnerable, disadvantaged at the grassroots level, they are organizing. They are getting more and more organizing and are able to articulate their interests. Transgender movements, farmers' movements, Dalit movements, all these are the examples for the grassroots movements getting organized. And second is, the level of participation, the amount of participation among the people is increasing, and most of the cases they are voluntary rather than mobilized by the political parties. The participation is voluntary. Previously, political parties have become the vehicles for organizing of these movements. Anti-corruption movement, Anna Hazare movement. It's a voluntary engagement of the people. Anna Hazare movement. And then, after this, is it good for socio-economic progress? So they are becoming more autonomous too. Autonomous, when I say, Jallikattu movement is more autonomous. They are voluntary, they are becoming autonomous, and more people and groups are getting organized. That is how the grassroots movements are changing. So, how is it good for socio-economic progress? Here, write down few points. Whatever comes, the participation, if you see the word, mention these points in your answer. Anything, participation, governance, decentralization, any word it comes up, write down these words. One is social capital. Social capital. Increased capacities for collective action. Increased civic and political knowledge. So that is political education, education about rights. Increased civic and political knowledge. Greater sense of empowerment and agency. Greater sense of empowerment and agency. Access to resources and services. Increased access to resources and services. Deepening of networks. Deepening of networks. So the common points I said in some other language, because these are the words which are used by World Development Report 2017. WDR 2017. So here, increased capacities for collective action. When people are gaining or organizing themselves, The collective voice together is much bigger than the individual voices when they added up. And when they are organizing, it means, understand, when they are individual or when they are, their energies are dissipated, when they are organized, that collective action gets structured. So it means the energies are getting in a proper direction. So energies are getting directed towards an action, towards a policy change. Take the example of Maharashtra, Madhya Pradesh, Punjab loan waivers for the farmers. And then access to services and resources, greater access to services and resources. Participative budgeting in Porto Alegre, Brazil. And then social accountability, all these concepts come over there. Social capital. So what is the social capital? The trust and confidence between the people are raising, and which is said to be essential for development, and which is an ample in the Eastern societies. And greater sense of empowerment and agency. When you are alone and you feel or you fear the retribution of the state, when there is a collective, you feel empowered. So that's why you get, when you are collective, you try to make a decision along with the collective. When you are individual, there is a sense of disempowerment that is existing. In the collective group, you are getting a sense of empowerment. So these are all the points you can talk about, which are said to be essential for development. You can give the examples of MKSS, which has led to RTI, and then MG Narega. All these rights-based approach, all these have come due to the movements of the people and their collectives.
Access to resources and services, how is that?
What is, public service delivery improvement.
So access, improvement of resources and services.
No. Access to services and resources, it means, in Bengaluru, there is citizen report cards. It means as citizens are started evaluating the public services, and public services started moving close to the citizens.
That's improvement in services.
Right. Improvement in services has to happen means availability of services, access to services, quality to the services, all has to improve. Greater access to service, it means. When you talk about improvement, access has to improve, quality has to improve. You can talk about improvement or this is just this thing. And then what are the weaknesses of these movements? So first is, the state sometimes taking very violent coercive response. The state is taking up violent and coercive response, especially against these grassroots movements. So for firing in Mandsaur, I think, firing, and then in Noida, all these are states, these responses. And then token participation, induced participation, captured participation. It means once the movement is starting, but it is getting hijacked by one or the other vested interest. Lack of sustainability, India against corruption. These movements, by their very nature, they cannot be sustained for long. And the participation is also influenced by the social hierarchies and exclusion tendencies. So the caste-based participations, all these things are the part of this. And then the lower, especially the Dalits and the tribal people, they have this sense of disempowerment due to state action from very long. The tribal people, they have, especially the tribals, a sense of disempowerment. So unless the state provides them the necessary legal support, the sense of empowerment cannot come true. If you talk about Forest Rights Act, Panchayat extension to scheduled areas, all these have provided for a sense of empowerment, then only it has led to the that greater participation in the public life. And if you come to the women, so with regard to women, lack of safe public spaces, equal access to the public spaces. So all these are the examples, right? These are the weaknesses, or these are making the grassroots movements weak. So political capture of these movements, if you talk about India against corruption movement, it was finally captured for political advantage by few individuals. lack of sustainability of the movements, token participation from few sections of the society, tokenistic participation we call it as. All these are the challenges. And then next question is, so now this is a very broad question, don't you think? A commitment to gender equality will strengthen every area of action to reduce poverty. How gender equality will reduce poverty? Now I'll make a small diagram like this. So I'll talk about gender equality. Gender equality. So what are the factors it will improve? Nutrition at the family level, early child care, nutrition, early child care, education, health and sanitation. Gender equality has impact on all these factors. Health and sanitation, and then income at the family level, and then so voice, collective voice against social evils or inequality, voice. So what is the voice we talk about over here? Especially women participation with regard to the women reservation bill, participation in the parliamentary debates and all these things that will provide for the 49% of the population to get the access to development, to take the benefits of development, the political participation and economic independence. These are the aspects related to the voice. So these are all the aspects. Just if you write that, every aspect of the poverty is been addressed. Studies and family income, everything has been improved. All the dimensions of the poverty are being addressed. Now, gender equality has another aspect. It reduces the intergenerational transmission of poverty too. Intergenerational transmission of poverty, which is the biggest problem in India. Now, it appears too broad a question. I just make this small diagram and I leave it to the examiner and just write 2 or 3 paragraphs onto that. And examiner, I'm giving my information to the examiner on this. This is a too broad a question. Now, suggest the strategies of Government of India to achieve gender equality. What are the strategies of Government of India to achieve gender equality? Those are programs. What are the strategies? Right. Empowerment approach, SHGs. Empowerment through economic opportunities. Economic opportunities. So that is, SHGs is a critical example. Then, right. Now, so with regard to the economic dimension itself is, so the financial allocations, that is gender budgeting, special access to the finances. And on the political side, we are talking about reservations to the women. Reservations to the women. And then equality. What are the other aspects we are talking about equality with regard to strategies? With regard to women equality, gender equality.
So just a question. Most of these have already been in implementation.
From very long, but what is the, but we have to.
Yes. So what is that?
No, that's what is. These kind of questions, we believe or else we feel that we have to write some special points. But these are very general questions. Now, when you come to the specificity, you bring the specificity through various value additions and also towards this recent current affairs. That's how you bring the specificity on these general questions. This is too broad a general question. So it is like this. So through gender budgeting, etc., you are considering women as a beneficiary. And then women development, women in development, women and development, gender and development. These are the 3 concepts. So with regard to this, at the global level, we have three concepts: women in development, gender and development. Gender and development. So these three concepts, what they essentially talk about. The first one is women shall be beneficiary or accessible to development, women in development. The next is women and development. What do we mean by this? Here, not just development of the women, whatever the systemic causes which are depriving the women for their development, these have to be addressed. Gender and development, the basic gender relations within the society have to be changed. Our gender roles have to be changed. It is not just women empowerment, it is changing the gender roles within the society that helps further. These are all the aspects related to women development. Now, if you talk about we want to change three major things with regard to women development are concerned. The legal framework in the country, the laws we are changing. So the laws have got male preferences, we are changing them towards the gender equality. So the fight for uniform civil or else among the abolition of triple talaq and all this, social and religious institutions are to be changed, where the woman is not been given equal access, the temple entry movement. How I am bringing specificity to the answer. The temple entry movement, or especially with regard to Shanishwara temple and all these things, these are a movement towards the gender equality. And equality through development, that is through education, Beti Padhao, Beti Bachao. Right. And then equality in opportunities, especially with regard to gender sensitiveness. Recent amendments or recent changes to the what is this? Maternity mothers, pregnant mothers. What do we call that? Labor laws changes. Labor rules are being changed. So maternity benefits. So these are all various strategy, or these are meant towards bringing in gender equality.
Can we add point regarding LGBT?
Right. So gender means LGBT also comes up in that. So if development is not engendered, it gets endangered. If development is not engendered, it becomes endangered. So this kind of questions, you don't need to have an answer, pre-framed answer. You have read so much across various spaces. If you recollect your syllabus, you can write an answer. If you recollect your current affairs, you can write an answer.
So can we add a point like safeguarding at workplaces?
Right. Prevention of sexual offences at, that's what is when I said legal frameworks have to be changed. It means there has to be more protective legal frameworks too. So the Prevention of Sexual Offences at Workplace Act, that is nothing but changing of legal framework.
Supreme Court came down on this LGBTs.
Don't get into so much. Again,
Like what reasons it has to identify?
so that's what is. The question will be specific on LGBT rights. When we talk about vulnerable sections, so why the Supreme Court has reversed the LGBT rights which are been passed by the recognition of the LGBTs. So that the question, it comes under the LGBT rights, not, there's a very narrow space. You cannot give more space to that point of LGBTs in this greater discussion of gender equality, because already we have much important points in this. This year I am expecting an LGBT question, because last 3 years I am expecting a question on LGBTs. LGBT rights, because across the world, I mean even US, the LGBT rights have come for discussion. Germany, recently a bill is passed recognizing the LGBT rights. When can I call my boyfriend as my husband? That's what is one of the man has asked. That's what is the Germany, this Angela Merkel, the German parliament has passed the LGBT rights. So that's why LGBT issue, it's repeatedly coming up in the news. Among the vulnerable sections, it never been this thing. And Supreme Court, when it was giving its judgment related to the reservation criteria, it also spoke about the, that is, backwardness, in defining the backwardness criteria. So the gender dimension also they spoke about. Right. Transgenders, they spoke about specifically about the transgenders. So it means repeatedly this issue is coming up in the news. That can be a question for you. LGBT rights.
Employment in public offices,
Kochi, etc. In Kochi, especially in metro and everywhere, I am seeing one or the other picture in Hindu.
Generally, I'm generally asking what is the basis for that judgment? So people reversing the Delhi High Court order.
That's what is social order. They did not see it from the rights perspective. They saw it more from a social perspective, social order perspective. Can I go to the next question?
So when the question is asked, let's suggest strategies or discuss the strategies, we have to be in the framework of government only, or we can add the point?
One thing is, you cannot remember the entire framework of the government for all topics. So, most of the government, it's a strategy, it flows from a very broad perspective. So today, every strategy of the government is guided by the neoliberal agenda. So by and large, neoliberal agenda is going one side, and creating of the networks and partnerships for the people to develop themselves is another side. And the third dimension is the rights-based dimension. These three are going. One is developing the opportunities through market, that is neoliberal agenda. And second is providing for, what is that? A protection, state protecting the vulnerable sections is the second thing. And the third thing is, with regard to, what did I say? The rights-based approach. So these are the broad strategies which the government is following. So market is about choices, development of networks, partnerships is to give voice, and then rights-based approach is to make access, to give universal access. Even the universal basic income is also one way a rights-based approach towards income. The universality of the services, that is what has been more and more spoken about. So the broad strategy is this. One is choices through market, choices by raising the opportunities, and then networks and partnerships. That is how the civil society and all these are growing. And the third thing is, that is rights-based approach, where you are giving more and more voice to the people, and where you want to achieve universality of needs and services which are meant to be given to the people. And protection of the vulnerable, there comes the social security, etc. But the social security space is coming down. Right?
We have very good points. Gender equality, religious angle.
Oh, thank you, thank you. Right. And actually yesterday I started writing an answer, wanted to give you for evaluation, but after that I got into the administrative work, I did not complete my paper. But really I wrote an answer, seriously. So, right, let's get into the next question. What is the time? 7:45. Okay, let's get into the 8th question. So, it's a very simple question. What is the meaning of empowerment?
Giving them control over their lives.
That is, giving an agency or giving them abilities to make decisions with regard to their life choices are concerned. Giving an agency to oneself on their own life. That is what is called as empowerment. So, this empowerment depends upon your capabilities, knowledge and understanding, and opportunities. It depends on these opportunities. So, these are indirectly connected to the economic independence and political participation. Access to political power, economic independence. So next is, let's make a small picture on the empowerment. So what is this empowerment is related to? So empowerment is related to, or I'll put it as this way, capabilities of the people, capabilities, access to political power, economic opportunities and economic independence. Economic opportunities and independence. Economic opportunities and independence. Independence. Capabilities, access to political power, economic opportunities and economic independence. And all these are leading to something called empowerment. So in this case, how the SHGs are leading to this? The self-help group movement. So the self-help group movement is leading to economic opportunities and economic independence. And self-help group movement, it involves training in the managerial capabilities. Training is a critical part of the SHG movement. It involves a productive economic activity. And then access to capital. And access to political power. And organized groups, networked groups, they try to articulate their power through political means. So if you talk about SHG movement in the urban, rural India, it has created a strong secondary rung leadership among the women. It has got many spillovers on the social side. The emphasis on girl child education, eradication of liquor, all movements got spearheaded when the strong secondary rung leadership is developed among women. So this is what SHG movement has brought in. So first, what is empowerment? That question is there. Just I draw this picture. I write one statement. Empowerment is giving an agency to an individual about their life choices. So it means how one has to lead his life, one has to decide. No one has to decide for the others. That is what is empowerment. So just I write this diagram, draw this diagram, so that I give this capabilities, etc. and everything. And I talk that how SHG movement is improving these capabilities. My answer, I'll write it less than 4 minutes. So that I can save that point time for some other answer. Yes or no? Right, this question, simple question or not? Daridravanta manam medadlo undandi. Sorry. What I want to say is, our understanding of the things is very complex, and we don't simplify that understanding to the other person. Think like a 10th class child. So we are so simple, we are expected to write the answers. So what is empowerment? How I need to articulate the points, and how I have to connect with the SHGs. This much we think about while writing the answer. So, I mean, we feel tensed and we feel that we do not know the answer. Are you getting that? Any doubt on this? So, simple picture, and then get into the answer, and then, so, draw those.
You would have to go into SHG weakness.
Why? Is that related to our question? How SHG movement can work towards such an empowerment process?
Just describe that.
That's it. These are the 4 points I explain. 4 points I explain. So here, economic opportunities, access, SHG is what it has provided. I keep over here access to capital. SHGs have created micro enterprise. SHGs have provided for necessary organizational training. So SHGs and how this empowerment, these are been connected. We are talking about that. One picture, I am explaining everything. For me, the objective is to complete the paper relatively with average quality. I don't want to be exceptional. At least I am not aiming for rank 1. If it comes, I am happy. Right, but my first objective is to get a good rank. Because first 10 ranks, or at least first 20, 30 ranks, predictability, or you can't aim for them. They come by chance. There are many other factors have to work. So, how we save our time so that we complete our 20 questions and we get at least 6 marks for each question. That is more than sufficient. That's what is our target has to be. And when I have only 10 minutes of time with me, how I shall complete 3 questions at the end. Right. So these things we need to talk about. Next question. So the very standard question of UPSC, this one. I'll rub the board for a while. So the 9th question. So universalization, obviously it is related to. So wherever health and education, housing, gender equality, all this comes up, you need to have certain small examples at your disposal. So in my class, I repeatedly told to you one point. India is the country which is trying to achieve universalization through universalization of the essential services through market. Across the world, every country has tried to achieve the universalization of the essential services through the state. Right? It has been criticized from time to time by various theorists. So from that perspective, we talk about this. I gave you in the class. So European model, American model. American model is based on market principles, insurance-centric healthcare delivery. And European principles is based on, that is NHS example is the thing, that is the state-centric collective healthcare system. And if you have a Chinese model, community-centric healthcare system, which is decentralized. Chinese is community-centric healthcare system. So these UK and US models, these are very technology incentive. The Chinese community-based healthcare system, it is human resources centric, health education centric. It is health education centric. So here, health education and making the services to reach to grassroots level, essential services, that is barefoot doctors. That's an example of China. And then you talk about Cuba. So the state and the role of the state can reduce the cost of the services. Wherever the marketization has happened across the world, the cost of the services have increased. Access to the poor from these for these services also has decreased. So what are the variables we talk about whenever we talk about universalization? Access, quality, equity, choice. Access, quality, equity, choice. Affordability, sorry. So obviously affordability, all these things will determine the access. Affordability, awareness, all these are important for universalization. Affordability, awareness, all these are important for universalization. Now, so in this case, how the state, what are the things states will address? The state tries to provide for access and equity, but the market provides for quality, and market provides for greater choice. But the choices are limited to the people who are affordable. So the rural-urban differences in access to services, rich-poor differences in access to services, right? Regional differences. All these can be explained because of the marketization. Now, insurance-based healthcare has always led to the increased cost of the healthcare and depriving the healthcare for the people who need the most. That is the poor, that is old and poor people. So in this case, the Cuban healthcare system, that is, which is a state-centric system, it has universalized the healthcare. On the other hand, various variables, human resources related to healthcare, medicines. So most of the out-of-the-pocket expenditure related to affordability, it is related to medicines. Thailand is able to achieve 75% of access, improve 75% of access to health care by decreasing the affordability, by improving access to medicines. In India, Jan Aushadhi shops is a in the step in this right direction, which I use it as a current affairs thing. So, next is express your opinions, add necessary examples. Cuba, UK, US systems, and then Indian system, especially three-tiered structured model of Indian system. All these are the examples. To what extent health policy tried to have this balance? So health policy, health is being more described as well-being. Health policy, it has defined health as chadukunandi samvatsaram. Health policy, education policy, please go through them once. Health is well-being, but rights-based approach is not being spoken about. So universal health is expected to come through partnership with market. So the private and public partnerships are being expected to be a way out towards universalization of healthcare. And essential healthcare, decreasing the cost of the drugs. All this emphasis on preventive healthcare, promotive healthcare is emphasized on national health policy. National health policy. So these are all the things we talk about. The wrong side of this is the national health policy did not declare health as a right. Health as a right. Right? Any doubts in this? Because I'm supposed to write 4 or 5 lines related to national health policy, but most of my point of discussion also has to be on state versus market debate with regard to the universalization of services. Now, transparency and accountability complements for policy effectiveness. Express your opinions. Write down this picture.
An approach for very general open-ended questions like this.
Which one? That's what I'm going to give you. So transparency, accountability, when these questions comes up. First, common thing is information between transparency and accountability. Information. And then in this case, transparency. What the transparency does? It makes information available. Did I give this already? Huh? Did I give this? Okay. And then because this has come in this year's report, that's why. I read it only some few days back. So information then is publicity. What the publicity does? It makes information accessible to the people. So that's why awareness is very critical. And then what the accountability does? Accountability does. Information actionable. It makes the information actionable. You can write about World Development Report 2017. Information actionable. So in India, with regard to policy effectiveness, the challenges, what are the challenges? The major challenges are related to the lack of coordination between the headquarters and the field level. So, ineffective passage of the information, lack of people control at the policy implementation level, corruption, these are all the challenges towards policy effectiveness. So policy effectiveness, I draw this picture. So policy formulation, policy implementation, policy monitoring, policy evaluation. Policy evaluation. These have to be well connected in a loop. So this loop is operated by transparency and accountability. This loop strengthens through transparency and accountability. Policy formulation, implementation, monitoring, evaluation. Evaluation. Policy evaluation. Policy evaluation. Policy evaluation. So, at all levels, what are the challenges? What all the challenges at all levels are? Right is. So, participation, policy effectiveness is depends on participation or popular control over the policy. Local resource mobilization. Local resource mobilization. Continuity at all levels. Continuity at all levels. Continuity. Policy continuity and policy coordination. Policy continuity and policy coordination. So, these all depend on transparency and accountability. Transparency and accountability. These all depend upon transparency and accountability. Right. So, for these questions, it appears that we know something about the question, but what we write. So, what I did over here, I took two words, transparency and accountability, policy effectiveness. For these two questions, I know some information, but how to connect this is my question. So, that's where I draw this drama. I do this activity. Instead of leaving the question, I try to send information in another format. So, this answer is providing how the accountability, transparency are connected with regard to the information. How this information forms the basis for the coordination between all these parts of the policy analysis. Right. Any doubt in this?
Just draw this and give it.
Draw this, explain this.
And how do you
Explain, I give you the points, right? So one thing is, information, openness in the organization, it provides for communication in the organization is vital. At the policy level, the major challenges are this. One is lack of coordination or inability to monitor and evaluate the policy for its effectiveness. So you talk about all this. These are related to lack of access to data, bureaucratic rigidities. So the transparency and accountability is, they put the pressure from below. So the people, when they keep the people ability to pressurize the bureaucracy or monitor and evaluate the bureaucracy is ultimately is expected to improve the quality of policy or policy implementation. That is what is the essence you need to drive.
We can start the negative, we can write the negative points like transparency without accountability uses and give examples like RTA.
So the teethless, it's the transparency without accountability is toothless. Right. So accountability without transparency is unviable. So here the question is not about transparency and accountability per se. The question is about policy effectiveness. How this policy effectiveness is improved by transparency and accountability. So in this kind of questions, the major problem which we face is the lack of, or else these are called processual questions. The question when it comes, how this is leading to this. When we say how this is leading to this, these are called processual questions. So in this place, forming the connection between the two is important. So how SHGs are leading to women empowerment? What did we do? We formed the connections. What is empowerment and how, what are the basic requirements or how the SHG is building the capabilities of the women and how is it connected to the empowerment? These are processual questions. So more for the processual questions, pictorial presentation is better rather than writing the answer, because when you write the answer, it do not give that feel.
it look very verbose and
Very verbose and general. So that's where you need to present it through pictorial. When question comes, how it leads to this, if kind of questions comes up, first make a pictorial. Take two variables, So here I have took the transparency and accountability as one thing, policy effectiveness as another thing. Based on that, I developed a pictorial. Right, that's a small technique. Next is this question, actually policy, very standard question, challenges of policy implementation. Very standard question. Do you want me to discuss this? Or can I give you a handout on this? Local pressures, right? Lack of policy coordination. All these implementation challenges, corruption at the grassroots level, lack of capabilities across the bureaucracy, bureaucratic rigidities. All these are the policy implementation challenges. What is food security? These fundamental questions that becomes very much irritating sometimes. When they ask you what, these many times I read this, I don't know what it is. So many of the people try to give textual definitions. We don't need to give textual definitions. Making or giving access to quality food of a person's choice at his time, or giving person a choice of, or quality food of his choice at his interest of time. At his interest of time. That is what is, and his ability to utilize that food for his nourishment. This all comes under the food security. So you shall have access to food, and then you shall be able to eat that and digest it, and after digestion it shall give you some energy towards activity. And what food shall be available? The food which is palatable, which your tongue likes. To your food choice. If you are a vegetarian, vegetarian food shall be available like that. That's what is the food security. So availability of food, access to food, utilization of food, and then that is nourishment or something. All this comes or it has to give you an energy towards activity. All this comes under the so-called as food security. So the food security depends upon the how much you are growing, how you are maintaining the distribution channels. Food security also depends upon health and nutrition. So if I have to utilize the food which I am using, my body shall be able to cooperate with me. So availability of the food, distribution of the food channels, access, utilization, all this comes under the food security itself. So what are the strategies of India towards food security? Other than that. So NFSA is a rights approach. Focused approach. Targeted public distribution system is focused approach. And focused approach, correction of nutritional deficiencies is focused approach. And fighting the hunger, it is National Food Security Act is to fight the hunger rather than the nutrition. Vitamin A deficiency correction programs, iodine correction programs, all these are focused approaches towards food security. And then, how India is trying to achieve? So now we have got twin approaches, we call it as. One way, we want to talk about energy deficiency. The other way, we want to talk about specific deficiencies such as vitamin A, iodine, etc. So we are taking a twin approach model for the food security in India. And second is, how India, what is the approach, what are the emerging challenges for India? So what are the strategies India has tried? What are the strategies? One is distribution channels, emphasis on distribution channels. So that's why public distribution system has come into existence. And then improvement in production. With regard to improvement in production, green revolution. And then making the food affordable, that is food subsidies. Food subsidies. So these are all the things which are the strategies of the government of India. And food as integrated with the health and well-being. So food is integrated to health, well-being and nourishment, nutrition and all these things, an integrated approach. And finally, what are the challenges to the food security in India? Climate change, loss of water, and then land degradation. And then here, Global Hunger Index, I think 2014 or somewhere, it spoke about changing food habits of India. More non-vegetarianism is growing. Non-vegetarianism is resource intensive. So in India is suffering from triple burden, it says. What is this triple burden? The triple burden relates to, one way we have communicable diseases, and the other way we are the capital of diabetes, hypertension, etc. And on the other way, nutritional deficiencies are increasing in India. So these three together, we call it as triple burden. Triple burden. And then vulnerabilities of food security are increasing from climate change, especially among the tropical countries, agriculture dependent countries such as India.
Migration is also challenge.
Right, you can write whatever it is. But again, I have to link it to current affairs. GM crops. In this context, the discussion on GM crops, food versus fuel argument. 1 or 2 points I write and I close it is the current affairs connection. Food versus fuel argument, that is biofuels. Fortification of foods. These are all the things. Right. These are all food subsidies. They all come under the food subsidies and focused approaches, midday meal schemes, and then this ICDS scheme, early nourishment of the child. All these are the strategies. Child-centric child-focused approaches to fight malnutrition. You can keep some heading and you can talk about. You don't need to know the strategy to write the strategy. When you see the programs, if you do reverse engineering, you get the strategy of the government. See the broader picture. That's what is. Naku teliyadandi answer point రాసుకునేటప్పుడు నేను. When I was writing when I was writing the question or writing the answer, I don't know what is the strategy. And I wrote the points and I verified to take the class. So when I verified, the strategy is the same. Because your thinking ability shall make you to go towards this strategy. Right. So first what we need to do, we need to believe we know the answer in the governance. Right, what is the time now? So can I complete this generalist versus specialist topic is there. The next topic is. So I'll just give the value addition points over there. Or you want me to continue in discussion in the next class?
Finish governance maybe.
Only 2 more questions. HIV and mental health care bill is a direct question.
List 13 because now that lateral entry debate is also going on.
Right, that's what it is. I'm going to cover this debate along with the politics. Because I want to cover some second ARC reports in our classes too, with regard to few fundamental topics. Right. Because the quality of the class comes down after 2 hours. I give you the points, I'll throw the points rather than explaining the points to you. Right, you want, or else just 2 more questions are there. I'll try to continue them in the next class. Because already it's 8:15. I'll continue the class after. So second ARC recommendations, and this topic has to be dealt along with the civil services in India concept. So the role of democracy, and I'll discuss this concept in detail, especially with regard to the state services versus central services. So what are the debates which are going on? So with regard to specialization of public service in India, the debate going on. Right. All India services debate. These are all the things I will cover in the next class. With specialization, when I talk about the parity between generalists and specialists, also we need to talk in the 7th pay commission recommendations, what are the objections raised. That also will add a point over there. So hope this discussion is helpful. Right, I mean my objective, I'll second ARC reports, I'll try to, or else especially second paper, I'll be reinforcing multiple times. My focus is on second paper and essay. The first paper focus is for Sandeep sir and Sinaya sir. I'm not involving myself at all with regard to first paper because I'm feeling ashamed that none of the students are getting marks in the second paper, which I am teaching. So if tomorrow I want to ask some teacher, what about the marks in your paper? I don't have an answer to it. So this year at least I will work with some pictures and some innovative techniques to increase our marks in the second paper, current affairs, etc. The fourth paper I gave it to Venkatamohan sir. Venkatamohan sir is one of our teacher whom I like the most, and you cannot improve your, you cannot understand his style of teaching in 1 or 2 classes. I want you to have some patience to understand him. Venkatamohan sir. Fourth paper will be dealt by him, and essay paper will also be dealt by him. And third paper, with regard to the economy is concerned, I will be talking few areas which are welfareistic oriented. Science and technology, these are all random areas. Either you do it or not, nothing makes a difference. Always you have to go and innovate in the answer over there. But the third paper is a scoring, when you know the technique. I'll be teaching you the technique and broad framework to write the economy answer. Right, security issues, and that particular area will be dealt to you by Ravi Pathak sir or some specialist on that particular area. So my entire focus this year with regard to test series will be on second paper. So to an extent on essay paper. The first paper, geography, will be done to you by Sandeep sir, drawing the quick diagrams, the maps, etc. And then history will be done to you by Sinaya sir and Balaji sir. So Sinaya sir, I have requested personally to him to do the entire culture again, to give the broad outer framework of the culture and in a comparative perspective across the continents. And I asked Himabindu madam to revise those particular dances, nonsense is there, oh sorry, what is that? Dances, drama and architecture. So I request her to just revise them. I think already these classes are done for you, right? I've asked her to revise those things once again, to brush up the things. I know you all have slept in the class for those classes. So she will be revising those. So my focus will be only on second paper majorly. Because if I focus on multiple papers, that's becoming difficult for me. And with regard to the correction of the papers, I need 15 days to correct your papers. And most of the papers I am saying again, subtests I will not be correcting. Subtests they are uploading every day, right? I will not be correcting the subtests, but I will be correcting the main tests. Main tests around 50 scripts I am getting, once in a week. I can manage those scripts. But subtests I am giving it to someone to correct that. Only for few papers, 1 or 2 papers, I will be correcting it, but most of the subtests I will not be correcting it. Right? So any other improvements? And then there's 1-to-1 phone calls I have to do. So 1-to-1 phone calls. So that this week relatively I am going to be free because I am going to take only one class this week. In this at least 1 or 1.5 hours every day I'll be taking up these calls. I'll be doing the calls. So that appointment software is getting ready. So almost it is ready. Just they are putting it for testing. So that makes us to take the appointments. Okay, this is what is my free time I will enter. So you can go to the website and take the appointments over that. So that I'll also know whose answer paper I have to revise before I talk to the student. If not, what happens is that predictability and this all goes up. Again, Rambabu sir promises you don't do anything. That kind of, right. So that appointment, once it comes up, then I will be able to handle that particular situation. So in the meanwhile, whenever I correct the paper, I will be calling you and talking to you. Have you got any messages that your paper is assigned for correction? Are you getting messages and everything? The system is working. So once I correct that, when I upload also, you get the message. I think you got the message, Norsh. When I upload also, you get the message that your paper is corrected. So when I upload it, I will be calling and talking to you answer by answer. So the appointment will be for 15 minutes. So that's why we have to keep our appointment only for correction of the paper, not for explanation of the topics. So that we can, where the technique is missing, how can we better structure these statements? This is to that extent we have to limit that. Thank you very much.